The Holy Gospel is written in the 10th chapter of St. Matthew, beginning at the 24th verse. Jesus said to the 12, "A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for a disciple to be like the teacher, and the slave like the master. If they call the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they malign those of the household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both the soul and the body to hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? And even the hairs of your head are numbered. So do not be afraid. You are more valuable than many sparrows. Everyone therefore acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before the Father in heaven. But whosoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. One's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake shall find it." Here is the gospel for the day. Please be seated. I think that I've told you many times, most of the people in the congregation are aware of the fact that I try to look during the week on things that reflect for the text for the week, and try and find things that coincide, that make sense according to the text. Sometimes you might feel that this is a big jump. As a matter of fact, some have even said that. How can you go from Abraham Lincoln to the Christmas gospel and make it work? But I find it is so obvious. It's so obvious to me that the Word is involved in all of the events of everyday life. It is not hard to find them at all. But they'll take you today on another trip. And before I start, I will give you the theme of the day. And the theme of the day is give 3 cheers for the law. 3 cheers for the law. This church that is so involved in saying that the law is not critical to salvation, it's the gospel, saving power of Jesus Christ. We don't like to hear how important the law is, but it is. Today, I don't think that there are 2 people that might be more happy than Jay and his son, Sean Bloom. A few weeks ago, they were approached by a man who came into Las Vegas on a test 2-person plane that probably was not safe. His name was Stockton Rush. And he came to Jay and his son Sean, and he said, "Have I got a deal for you? For only $250,000 apiece, I will take you on the Titan, an underwater craft. We'll take you 25,000 feet deep into the Atlantic Ocean to see a ship that was sunk 111 years ago for only $250,000 apiece. I'm sure you will enjoy it. I'm sure you want to go." But Sean had done some research. And he said, "You know, I've read the critique of this titan that you've got. And according to the laws of physics, it's unsafe. And the more and more that has gone down, the more and more it is likely not to make it the next time. And he advised his father strongly not to go on this journey. The law prevailed. They liked to listen to the laws of physics, and they are alive today. Well, that opened the door for another father-son combination. His name was Shahzada and Suleiman Dewi, billionaires. And so that was the next place that Stockton Rush went, and presented them with the same possibility. Now, I don't know, they had the same access to the authorities and the people that evaluated these underwater crafts, the same as the Blues. But they said, why not? We don't really believe in that law. We think it's safe. And last Sunday, they perished. You can say what you want about the law, whatever law it is, whether it's a justice system, whether it's natural law, whether it's God's law, or laws that govern every aspect of our life, from social gatherings to athletic contests. And by the way, there were two other major news things, too, that dealt with the law. One with a past president who has a lot of classified documents that he's not supposed to have. Now, I've got to tell you that there are some people in this congregation that I've said I would trust you with absolutely anything. I have total confidence in you. But if I found out that you had boxes and boxes of secured documents that dealt with national safety, I would probably turn you in. And then the other president's son, well, he broke laws and he said, well, I'll confess to a couple of the laws, and the agreement is if I confess to a couple of minor laws, just like forgetting about $100,000 of my income tax, I'll avoid being persecuted for the other law, which I broke. Some people don't have much respect for law, and maybe sometimes we have to look at ourselves and say, maybe we aren't paying much attention to the law either. You know, every aspect of our life is governed by laws. As a matter of fact, I saw a program on television the other day that said by the time you get up in the morning and listen to the alarm clock, the time you eat and go to work, there are about 110 laws that govern your life in that hour's time. Laws govern everything. Athletes know about laws. There is an area in which the game is to be played. There are out of bounds, places you're not supposed to go when you're playing that particular game. There is something that counts for goals. And then if we don't abide by those rules or laws of the game, we are penalized. We are punished. Relationships have laws. When you go into a marriage, it's a covenant. And when you stand up before the altar and you confess your love to your spouse, you're talking about a contract and certain things that you will and will not do. Some years ago, there was a group, I can't remember the name of it, but they called them, they were a group in the early 60s, and they had a song that was a hit called The 10 Commandments of Love. It said if you violate these commandments, your relationship will go no place. As a matter of fact, it might even dissolve. Every kind of situation has laws. You drive down the street in the morning and you're governed by laws and hope that the other people are paying attention to the laws, because if they don't, it can be a catastrophe. And not only a penalized to them, but also to those of you who are obeying the law. Okay, so now we've talked about the law. So how does it apply to anything that we've read this morning? Well, it just so happens that it applies very well to our epistle lesson, the second reading, Romans. And it starts out, should we continue in sin in order that grace may abound? Now, let me explain how that came about. The other 4 chapters, most of which we've covered in our Bible study class on Tuesday morning, Paul made a great distinction between law and gospel, and saying that the law does not save you, it does not bring you into heaven because you're all going to transgress the law. It is the grace of God which gets you there. And if you remember, it was in this section of Scripture that Martin Luther grabbed onto something that changed the history of civilization. The man is justified by grace alone, not by the works of the law. So what happened then when Paul was talking about that, and that was shocking to the Jewish people that he was talking to, because they were very concerned about obeying the Mosaic law. And to the extent that you could obey the law, you were a good Jew. And to the extent that you wandered from the law, you were not somebody that had much faith in God. And Paul tried to do away with this, but after he had convinced that he was clear on this issue, that the law doesn't save, that the gospel saves, he said something about the law in this chapter of Romans as well as other chapters. What he said was, the law is holy. The law is spiritual. We need to be slaves to the law of God, or we will perish. Not taking the law unserious. He said there are 3 things that the law does. Law brings order to your life. You can't have a life without laws that govern society. You can't have laws that don't govern your life in terms of your relationship with God. That's what he said, Paul did. It's interesting, a law passed this last week in California in which you cannot report somebody that is shoplifting in a store. That's forbidden. The security people can apprehend people who are robbing the stores in California, but you can't turn somebody in. That's forbidden. Now the stores say that that's going to invite more theft. Do you understand that theft incurs about 20% of what you pay at H-E-B or Walmart? The shrinkage is approximately 20% in major stores of people stealing, and that has to be made up with the profit they make on what you pay for legally. See, if we start doing away with the laws, those merchants in California say it's going to be even worse. It'll be 30 or 40 or 50%. Because laws create order, and Paul agreed with that. The second thing that Paul said, the law is the mirror in which you look to find a reflection of how your life is going in terms of what God wanted it to be. And what he said, you got to get away from comparing yourself to anybody else in terms of the law. Because you can always find someone that's breaking more laws than you are. But if you look into the law of God, you'll find out that there's some distance and some place that you have yet to go in terms of living the Christian life. And then Paul said, the major thing about the law is that it drives you to Christ and the gospel. If you really take the law seriously and you look at it and you look at yourself, in that reflection, you will be thrown onto the grace of God and say, Lord, I need your help. That's the importance of the law. And again, I repeat, Paul said the law is holy, the law is essential, and we need to become slaves to the law in order to really find freedom. Paul said, you Jews, you have your circumcision, but you make a lot of claims about your obedience to the law, but you talk to people about not stealing and you steal. You talk to people about adultery and you commit adultery. You talk about killing and you kill. And the circumcision isn't going to save you. But not obeying the law will take you further and further away from God. Then he said something very insulting to them. He said, some of the Gentiles who aren't subservient to this law at all, they're better law keepers than you are. Sometimes they have a life that is reflective of really what my law says. And then you say, well, how is that? They don't have our scriptures. They said the law is inherent in the person. Every society has understood there is a necessity of laws. That's in the heart. That's in that person that God gave you. And you know instinctively what is right and wrong. And the Gentiles pick that up. God knows the heart, and sometimes they will be declared more righteous than you. When founders of our country made up the Constitution and all the other legal documents in the world of our country, they made this statement. All men, we find these truths to be self-evident. Talking about laws, we find these laws to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sometimes they forgot what that really meant. They didn't really mean it for everybody, but it's there. And it's an accurate statement. Well, God tells us to let people see our good works, not for our salvation, not to earn points, but to see the love of God so they can glorify our God through what we do. Did Paul say works were not important? Absolutely not. They are absolutely critical. They are what gives us order. It is what confronts us with our shortcomings, and it leads us to grace and love of God. Let's give 3 cheers to the law. Amen. Second hymn is what?